If anyone is for some reason here, I'm just sending this link places. Okay, cool. Fun, fun, fun. Fun, fun, fun. And what else? Put this up on the IG. Hey cuties, it's me Backslash. I am on YouTube Live right now, continuing my special effects makeup demos from the Nickel Film Festival's Ghoul School. So hop over to my YouTube channel if you want to hang out and watch some weird gore shit happen. Hey cuties, it's me Backslash. I am on YouTube Live right now. Cool. I'm gonna throw on some tunes and continue this look. Keep on going in a minute, and I will explain what I'm doing as I'm going, because that's the point of a demo. My phone doesn't want to. My phone is like so on its last legs. It doesn't want to do shit these days. It especially doesn't want to open Spotify for some reason. I just want to listen to music. Oh my God. No. Look, this is what I've got. Come on, Spotify. Not happening. Well, that's frustrating. Anyways, so basically, the narrative of this look is that I'm going to be a Okay, so the story of this look was that this was a person who was like transforming into a fish person, and they were not keen on that, and so they ripped their gills off. So I was doing this for the Nickel Film Festival like horror workshop, and I'm just going to keep going because I have to shoot a promo video after this, and so I may as well have a look on. Not may as well have a look on. May as well continue this look. That's what I was trying to say. And now that I'm not doing it for the Nickel, I can start using tools and colors which are better in quality. So I'm moving away from the palette I was using, which was one that I bought from Spirit of Halloween for like no money. I'm going to move over to my iMagic palette, which I like a lot. And I have a bunch of brushes here that I bought from a brand called Do Care. And I have a Revolution palette, but I'll probably also grab some colors from my Sugar Pill collection, because as we all know, I'm obsessed with Sugar Pill. Okay, so I was doing a rush job of this, but now that we're not rushing, we can I can chill out a little bit and do a slightly better job. So I'm going to wipe away some of this because I want to do a fake I want to do a different shape here. It's tough because I do have I have blocked my brows, so that is more difficult. But I'm going to go in with, I'm going to continue my scales and just get those done. And for that, I will continue using this dollar store brush and the trash makeup that I have from Spirit of Newfoundland. Nope, Spirit of Newfoundland is not it. Spirit of Halloween. So I'm basically using the shape of the paintbrush to my advantage to create the shape of the scale. And then I'll go in with a darker color. I have like a dark bluey, greeny purple here, and I'll use that for the shadows under the scales. I'm actually going to go ahead and continue using my little dollar store brush because it has a nice fine point, and I don't want to muss up my good brush that has a nice fine point. So doing the illusion makeup, the way that I do it at least, is very much working back and forth from between your highlights and your shadows. And I am using this like purpley color right now to lay in the base of the shadows for these scales, but ultimately I would prefer to use something that has a bit of a red hue, or reddish brownish, like you can see right here, because I find that it makes the shadows way more prominent. I've already powdered this side, so I'm going to have to go back and rework it with powders rather than cream makeup because I don't want it to turn into a pile of mud. Cool. All right. So when we're doing illusion makeup, it's really like, for me, I always go back to thinking about like physically in the real world, how would these objects exist? And in the case of something like scales, that really works also for how we paint them. You'll get used to how to apply highlight and shadow, but basically, I've done this in the reverse before, where I've applied the shadow first and then tried to go in over top of the highlight. The problem with that is that your white highlight is going to get immediately muddied by whatever shadow color is already lying down, and you're never going to get that nice crisp white. So that's why I work from the highlight first, and then I can go in with my shadow color. And when you blend it down into the highlight, it immediately lightens and creates the kind of gradient that you're going for. So in the case of the scales, we're working from the lowest, the bottom row of scales up to the top row of scales. Now on my actual face makeup here, this whole area was already highlighted. So we're not even really seeing the highlight from the scales. We'll just have to go in and define them with the shadow color. And I'm using really tiny, very fine, very light, feather light touch of brush strokes to do this. This is just going to give me the base of my scale shapes. And then I'll go back in afterwards with the powder color because it does have a much nicer, richer set of colors. Okay, so we're almost done round one of the scales. As I mentioned earlier, I did already powder that side, so it's probably not even worth trying to go over it with cream. But I'm just going to do one scale on the top there. Okay, so now it looks like a flower. And I should have made different choices than I made, but you know what? I didn't, and here we are. Cool. So that's where we're at with it right now. We need to continue the shadows up here. I really strongly would like some music. Deleting some stuff off of my phone so that I can maybe have enough space for it to just open Spotify. Who even knows? Okay, this is not working. All right, cool. So we have this much. I'm going to powder it, and then I'm going to, nope, that's a lie. I'm going to go in with my roundy brush with some of this darker purpley color because I definitely want to create the way that we have like a shadow around the temple. I definitely want to create a sort of a recession over here, not for any real reason. I haven't super designed this character. I just want there to be more depth going on. And I will put a wig on afterwards, so it's not that important that I have a perfect blend out onto my scalp, my scalpy skull. I really like a hard cut on a shadow. So I'm going to give it that, and then we'll go back in with, now this side's already powdered, so it's going to be a lot harder to work over here. And I want to blend lightly out into this area so that the highlight over the eye becomes much more of a protrusion. And even with that tiny bit of shadow that's already occurring, this is also how like wrinkles can be constructed, can be created on an illusion makeup, but that bit of shadow has already allowed this highlight to appear much more prominent. So this is partly where the color theory piece comes in too, is understanding like what colors next to one another are going to create the most dramatic effect, or maybe not even dramatic, but just the effect that you want it to have. I haven't done the highlight on the other eye yet. I haven't really decided yet whether this eye should also be a scary fish eye or whether it should be like a normal human eye that's like just becoming fishy. That hasn't really become fishy yet. Okay, cool. A lot of this whole process is also really about understanding how the brush strokes work with your particular brushes and of practicing those brush strokes. So loading up your brush with a color, it's going to deposit mostly right at the onset of that stroke, and it's going to fade as you pull away. So practicing your brush strokes is another important part of the process. And stippling is a great way to blend, and it's also a great way to lay in color so that it adheres really nicely over your ideally primed skin. So now we have, we've created brow ridges by placing some shadow along the upper edge of the brow. And on this case, we do have a highlight existing there already. Again, this is a long process. It's a process that is a lot of back and forth between your highlight and your shadow. So this is where we are right now, but I might want to go back in. Let me pick a brush sort of arbitrarily with my, you can't probably see this, with my turquoise color and some white. I'm going to mix that on my little floppy little palette here. So if I want to create, oh, this white sucks. This is really, truthfully, like I know that the purpose of this was to do it for the 48-hour film challenge and to like keep the materials really accessible. But what you spend in money, if you are able, you will save in frustration because things will just work better and more efficiently and more quickly if you can get even a few quality items. So I don't really know what I want this shape to be yet, but let's just say, there we go. I really loaded the brush with white that time. So now I've applied that highlight right over the edge here. And I'm blending it up into the mid-tone. And that's just the first round of shadow here. And we'll blend those together. There. But that already created a much more prominent ridge that will become much more well-defined as colors into this area here. And I'm going to go ahead and hope that there's enough white on the brush to. So that is giving me much more of an effect than on the other side. Both are successful. It just depends on how prominent one wants that ridge to be. So I'm going to go back onto this side and I'm going to give it a similar treatment. Loaded the brush up with white and teal, and then one solid brush stroke across the top is what's going to give me that nice crisp highlight. There we go. Now we're matchy-matchy. Cool. Always have a paper towel in your lap or on hand, on side to wipe off your brushes as you go. So we've created this much shape now, and I'm going to go in with this one, which I was using for gore on this side. Look how nasty that is. And I'm going to, you know what? I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use a different brush, and I'm going to go in with my really dark brown that I have. Again, this was a Sears purchase, so there's no hope in hell of getting it again, which is going to devastate me when it someday is gone from my life. But go to Shoppers, pick up a really cheap brown. And if we want to really make this protrude, we give it that nice crisp highlight white along the top edge, and right underneath it, right butting up against it, because we want it to be sort of like an overhang, we give it that super dark color. Again, I don't recommend using black because it falls really flat. And now with a very light touch, I'm just blending that brown out into the cream purple that we'd laid there. And now we have a very, you know, prominent thingy. We've created a fake cavity. I'm going to just mimic that on the other side, pulling that brown down into the purple. Lovely. Cool. It's really washed out on the webcam, unfortunately, but the colors look great in real life, I promise you. So we have done a little face sort of sculpting over here now. I realize this looks more like a flower than scales. My bad. It looked more scaly when the middle wasn't in it. And so you know what? I might actually just go ahead and get rid of it. And I'll go in afterwards and reapply a highlight color. I think I like that better. So I'm just going to go in with my roundy brush. I'm going to pick up a little bit of my turquoise and my white highlight, and I'm going to reapply that in the center of the forehead. It is a normal shaped, it's you know, it's not designed to have any sort of illusion, the forehead, other than that it has scales on it. So that is the high point of my regular forehead. So that's where I'm going to go ahead and apply my highlighted color. It's just going to reflect the natural shape that was already there to begin with. And then I'll figure out how to finesse the top edges of those scales with a little bit more nice highlight after the fact. There we go. I like that better, I think. I know that it's pretty washed out on the camera, so sorry about that, folks. I've messed up a couple scales there in the process. So I'm going to go back to my cream white again. Spirit of Halloween. It's not great, but it'll do. And we'll lay back in some of those scales. And then I'll have to go back in with my shadow colors afterwards again. So grabbing my little baby brush and my dark purpley color, and I'll go in again just under these scales to give them back that definition. But I think I really like that sort of divot in the middle that's creating the crisp C-shaped highlight on the front bottom edge of the scales. It's much more visible on this side, I think. So I'm gonna go in with a very tiny bit of my shadow color on that top row of scales and try and create that really subtly. Oh no. So I'm basically going to take that shadow color and I'm going to mix it with my turquoise highlight color that we just applied in the center of the forehead. So I have a really muted version of my shadow color that is mixed with my midtone. And I'm just going to set it in there ever so gently with very little pressure on the brush. Again, your pressure really controls how much color is going to get laid down. That's sort of a two-part thing. It's the amount of color you load on your brush at the onset, and it's the amount of pressure you're applying on your brush when you lay it down. So I do have a napkin on my lap every time I'm doing this. It's because I'm cleaning my brush off on my napkin. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to just ever so lightly pull the top of that shadow impression up into my highlight, and it creates that little bit of texture. I've forgotten to do this bottom one, so we'll give her a little, there we go. So now we've created a certain amount of depth on those using the oh no, oh I just got cream makeup like all over my little phalange here. So that's kind of like the base that I would lie down for that makeup. I'm trying to create a shadow because the sun's coming out, and I'll probably set that now. I may want to go in these areas and just grab a little bit of a shadow color plus my mid-tone, which is that teal color. And I'm going to do some little spots just because why not? Because I really like texture, and part of my ethos with any drag makeup is like, if you're not 100% satisfied, just add more shit. So I'm just going to add a couple little spots just for the sake of having a little bit more detail. I feel like fish are spotty. I feel like fish have little spots. So this is definitely, it's like fish, it's alien. I'm happy with any and all of the above. Little details are often what will sell a look too. So okay, so we've added some little spots. I'm not sure that was all that necessary, but there they are. So now that we have that laid down, I don't want to, okay, it's 5 minutes till the next session with the Nickel live on Facebook. They're doing some great horror workshops today for the 48-hour horror challenge. I'm going to powder all of this now. Again, I'm just using baby powder. You want to make sure you have a nice amount of powder on your sponge so that it creates a barrier between the surface of your sponge and the makeup, the cream makeup. If you do not have enough powder, the color will transfer onto your sponge. And then the next time you go to powder, it will deliver that color onto the area you're trying to powder and ruin all of your hard work sometimes. You know, not that that's ever happened to me or anything. It certainly has. Okay, so now that we've powdered this area, I can come back to it after with more highlight, more shadow. I'm going to go back in and rework all of this so that it has even more depth. I'm going to go in with Sugar Pill. This is called Ice Angel. Sugar Pill is a vegan, cruelty-free brand out of the States that I really like. They're a bit pricey, but totally worth it. But you can pick up like simple, you know, glitters and shiny stuff again at either Shoppers or Spirit of Halloween. I'm going to return to the eyeball area because this is a part that we certainly didn't get done. So I don't want my natural eyelid to be the focus of this sunken eye. I want to create a new eyelid altogether. And this is an old trick that comes from drag. So in order to eliminate our existing eyelid, I'm going to take some liquid black eye color, and I'm going to paint the whole back of my eyelid with this black. This takes some focus, so I am not talking while I do it. So you will see now that I have that color laid on there that once I open my eye, my natural eyelid will kind of disappear. I'm again using my super dark brown here. As you may recall, anytime you set a liquid or you put down a liquid, you have to set it with a powder so that it doesn't smear everywhere. This is especially true of eyelids because they fold up. They will deposit any of that liquid eye color up onto the eyelid above it. Okay. I don't know how much you can see on this. So now that I have this blacked out, I have to think about like what is the new eyelid sort of shape that I want to make visible. And I think that I want it to kind of be on top and for maybe for it to be like that. And that's following the drawing that I posted earlier. If you were tuning into the nickel thing, my drawing is kind of handy, but not super handy, so I'm not going to go for it. But essentially, I'm creating a sort of new eyelid shape that is sunken into this eye cavity that we're making to look like it's sunk in. So I'm going to take that black eyelid coverage, that shape, and I'm going to think about where do I want the eyelid to. So that will be my new eyelid now. I've created a new, basically you're taking the crease of your natural eyelid. If you think about that, how when you open your eye, it creates that little line, that wrinkle, and you're sort of artificially drawing a new one. And that's basically the premise for a lot of pretty standard drag makeup is you create that new crease. And because we want this eye to look really sunken in, we're going to bring that darkness pretty far down because I really want this to feel like this is like a hole in my person fish head, and the eye is kind of peeking out of this deep hole. I'm going to go ahead and grab. I know I said don't use black shadow, but I low-key lied. So I've grabbed my black. This is again Sugar Pill. There's a dark color on this Revolution palette, but you can see pretty quickly it's really more of a dark gray. You could use super dark brown, super dark purple, but I'm going to choose to use black here to set this. And I'll bring that down a little bit. You can see already, or at least I can, the difference that like a quality product makes. It makes your life a million times easier. Get a good brush, get a good eyeshadow. It'll make a world of difference. But again, this is all totally achievable if you do not have those things. It just makes for a nicer experience for you, the painter, if you do have them. So I'm going back to my dark, this is a dollar store brush, pointy. This is from Spirit of Halloween. It's from their little bruise wheel thing. And I'm going to take that super dark purple color, and I'm going to continue to sort of sculpt this. Now we're building this in a way where it's like this part of the face. This is like what is it? Orbital bone? Occipital bone, some kind of bone. It starts with an O. It's where your eye socket is. So if I poke myself in the eye, I can feel that bone for me is naturally right above my eye crease. But we want to, in our illusion, we want to take that bone way up. We want to bring it way up onto where my natural eyebrow is. So. And we want it to be really severe. We don't want it to be gradual like it is when you have, skin and your eyeball. I want it to be a very severe, like suddenly it's just plunged into the head. and you don't even really need to look at reference photos of like a sunken eye for this. Think about anything that mimics the shape that you want. So frequently I think about, you know, the area near my parents' house where there's a big overhang of soil and it goes down to the beach, and the overhang comes over the grass, and then there's a big undercut where the soil is eroded. And those kinds of shadows are, you know, pretty much exactly the same. We want to create that sort of overhang illusion. So the darkest part of the shadow will be right under where the overhang is, which is the brow bone in this illusion case. Okay, cool. That looks not bad. So I'm going to go ahead and take a lighter color. I'm just going to keep using the Revolution palette because I already talked about it. It's fairly cheap at Shoppers and it has a pretty decent little color range. So I'm going to take a mix of the sort of red, orange, and this peachy color. I mean, we might go back in with one of these two purples as well to give this some highlight. In this case, we're imagining that that area, that sort of eyelid, the new eyelid we've created, is protruding, but not that much. So it's catching a little bit of light, but not too much. So we're not going to go ahead and apply like a bright white highlight like we did on the forehead where the light is really catching. This is just sort of peeking out from the depths of the darkness of the skull cavity that we've created. So we'll give it some of that. It's hard to know what you're seeing versus what I'm seeing in the mirror. Okay, cool. I will go ahead and bring the dark color down under the eye because we want that to be sunken as well. Because right now, the way this shape is constructed, it doesn't really make sense. Like if this was protruding, maybe let's just try that in the process. If this part of the face was still a little bit more human, and it was protruding out the way it naturally does on my face where it then connects with my nose, we probably wouldn't have that point there. And I can go back in afterwards with my foundation color as well and do some correcting of the shape. But at this point, let's go back with the dark purple and our little pointy brush. And continue to place the darker colors to create that depth. So logically, physically, what would be happening here is what I think to myself when I'm trying to decide how the illusion paint is going to go. So we have this is protruding. The cheekbone is always a high point. So if we keep that natural, then this will be a high point. And so there will be some highlight here. That'll be natural anyways. Even over here, we would place highlight there. But that highlight can then continue along under this edge and up onto the nose to create that depth. And then we'll bring the highlight up here as well to connect that fleshy bit. So let's just do that. And we'll just see how it goes. I'm going to take my, and I think this is around the point where I'm going to go ahead and start merging the fishy tones with my flesh tones, because I've made this gill prosthetic and I've made it in flesh tone. So I don't want to bring that blue down really pretty much any further than it already is. And I will find, clean your brushes all the time. So I'm going to lay my foundation color in this region. If you're there and you have questions or comments, feel free to chime in the chat for sure. I welcome that. Absolutely. There was some white on my brush, so it definitely made my foundation pretty light there, but that's fine because it's going to be a highlight area anyways. So I'll bring that along there. Thinking about the difference between the sort of like severe overhang and what you might want to be like a more naturally rounded edge is also an important part of making decisions for your illusion paint. For example, I really like that this is a big overhang, but I don't know that I love that that's as severe as it is. So I might just try blending it out a little bit. I don't always know how things are going to work necessarily. And so sometimes I just try things and then you go back and correct if it doesn't work, and that's fine. This is also why having play paint nights by yourself or with friends is a great idea, because it will teach you what's going to work and what's not going to work. So this is kind of working for me. It's not perfect, it's not ideal, but I do like that this part is starting to come forward a little bit. I don't think this connection is going to work for me, so I'm going to switch it out a little bit by adding, by bringing this, continuing to bring this down. And we'll bring that out more gradually in the same way that we did with that one. And similar to creating the lid on top, we'll create sort of a bag on the bottom there. And that's totally going to work, I think. So I've already laid some foundation down here, so I'm going to go ahead and blend it out a little bit. And I'm definitely going to come back into this inner area and really darken it up so that the shape makes more sense. Okay, so I'm going along the bottom edge there and blending that out. And a lot of this is about really blocking these shapes in, doing some of this finessing like we've done with the scales. We've done some highlight, we've done some shadow, you know, down here we've created some shape, we've done some highlight and some shadow. And I often will kind of like do the first pass and rough in maybe like 3/4 of the form and the shadow and the highlight and the detail. And then at the end, I'll go back, especially with my powders that are much more pigmented. And I'll put in like the final rounds of details that really kind of sell it. Here we go. So I'm getting my super dark brown back out. And I'm going to try that in here. We might need to go in with a bit of black, which will be totally fine because it's mixed with all this red and brown. This is a bit sloppy here, but I know that the bridge of the nose is going to be like a major highlight area, so I can come in afterwards and correct the edges with my highlight. Okay, so that was really nice. I put that brown there, that dark brown, and it made this really nice, crisp, deep edge there. So we'll blend that out a little bit into where the sort of eye bag is, and then we'll come back to that like we did with the eyelid, which I really would like to give some, oh, I lost my brush for a moment. I'd really like to give that some more attention. I think I do want it to be just a little bit brighter. So I've gone in with a bit of yellow and that sort of peachy color from this palette. And I'm going to go in with the peachy and the yellow and the white actually from the bottom part of this palette to bring that bag underneath to life. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm not mad at it. I'm okay with it. Feels all right. Cool. So we have the gore over here. This is where this person tore their gills off. I think we should go ahead and put the gills on because it's really going to help me to make decisions about what the rest of the look is going to be like. So I made this gill prosthetic yesterday. And it's not exquisitely well made, but you know what? I'm okay with that. So here's a hot tip. Get yourself a white eye pencil. This one came from my mom. She bought it for me for Christmas, and it is Annabelle Cole. White eyeliner pencil. Oh, we were doing bruising earlier, and I have some real ones down here on my arm. Not bad. So here's a hot tip. Whenever you are applying a prosthetic, you take your prosthetic, and wherever the edges are, you can use a white pencil to mark the edges of your prosthetic, because the white pencil will totally get covered up by any other color or foundation that you're using. And it gives you an excellent sense of where to lay down your spirit gum so that you're not just, you know, randomly applying it and hoping for the best. So that's pretty large. You can see the edges of my prosthetic are really not that large. I've got, you know, like 3/5 of an inch. Nope. 3/8 of an inch on this side, and around the rest, it's about 1/8 or 1/4. So I don't really need that much spirit gum, except for kind of on that front edge where it's a little bit wider. Spirit gum does dry pretty quickly. Now I know you want it to be, you know, pseudo dry and tacky, but I'm not even going to try and get the whole thing. And I'm going to use my finger I never use for makeup to tack this up. I'm going to go slightly past the edge that I've drawn. It's definitely better if you don't have makeup on underneath, but okay, cool. I'm going to take this, I'm going to place it, and I'm going to tap it down onto the sticky spirit gum edge. And then we're going to go similar to this side. We're going to go back over this edge with latex to seal it down. And then I'm going to come under here and do the bottom edges. It's not that big. I probably could have done it all. Definitely want to come down over that white line enough that not too much. You don't want like a wild, massive amount of sticky everywhere, but enough that it's definitely going to catch all of the front edge of your prosthetic. That edge is what really sells it. Gills. Gills indeed. Okay, cool. So this is where we come back in with our latex. Latex is quite finicky. It will always, always, always stick to itself. So if you have a sponge that already has some latex on it, I literally just ripped the edge of this sponge off that had latex. And then just because I'm picky, I'll cut that edge again so it's a little bit nicer. using. See, this is not stuck down as I want it to be. I'm going to give this a little shake. This, again, is latex that has my foundation in it, so it's a little bit easier to color match it. I don't have real palettes. I have an old margarine lid. And you know what? It works just swell. At some point in a little while, I'm going to go back to the grind or the nickel horror school on Facebook so that I can watch what's happening from the grind mine folks. Okay, so I have some latex on my sponge, and I'm going to take that and we're going to start going over the edges of the object, of the prosthetic. It's always better to do multiple thinner layers rather than one thicker one. It dries faster, and it just works better. Obviously should not have painted that whole eye before I did this, but that's okay. We'll come back to it and re-finesse it. Getting that back edge is a bit tough because I cannot see it. Hoping for the best here. Cool. Now the goal with this is both to seal it to my skin, but also to kind of blend it so you don't really see that edge so much. There are areas where that's easier and areas where that will be a little bit harder. I'm just going to quickly check this little massage. Let's see what's happening. Yeah, I haven't decided yet what I want to happen on this side of the face. I haven't decided whether it should be a normal-ish eye or whether it should be this sort of ghouly eye. I don't know what makes more sense in the context of the character. So if you have thoughts, feelings, or opinions, please chime in the chat. Cool. Okay. This is still a long road to done, is what this is. Perhaps I will start with, perhaps I'll come back to the forehead piece and do some of that detailing while I wait for this to dry. So I have this here. There's some interesting things happening outside my house. That's fine. So I'm going to take this white, and it's not really a very good white, to be honest. And I'm going to use a different brush. The brush that I really want to use, I know is covered in black, so I know it will ruin what I'm doing, but it would also be the best brush to use, and that is this stubby little guy. It really packs color in, and I love it, and I use it for everything, but apparently I used it recently for something with a very dark color. Okay, so I'm using this guy. It's a little bit fluffier. I'm loading it with the white color, and then I'm applying that over top of my little highlight areas. Pretty much with the same gesture that we used to do the scales in the first place. This is, again, one of those opportunities where you can use the shape of the brush really to your advantage. So the scales are basically the same shape as the brush, and so I am using that to create the shape of the scales without having to worry too much about like sort of modeling them. I don't know if it's showing up really on the camera, but adding this white powder highlight is really making these scales like pop a lot more than they were at first. Also, I just discovered that this was not effectively powdered and is still pretty creamy. And so it got onto my brush, which may affect the quality as I try to move forward. Okay. We're just doing this for all of the scales. This is the kind of thing where like on an edited video, you would absolutely go to time lapse. Okay, so I've applied additional highlight to all of my scaly guys, and we'll come back and do more of the shadow in a minute. But right now, we're going to add a second little layer of latex to the edge of this guy. Oh no, I have a little lift there. That's unfortunate. You really do want to avoid wrinkles and lifts on the edge of your prosthetics if you can. It's the most dead giveaway that you have a prosthetic on. And I've actually got two. But I'm not on set today. This is just for fun. So things to really pay a lot of attention to, though, if you are on set. So I'm laying the latex outside of the prosthetic and then scooping it inwards so that it will like kind of catch on the edge. And then I'll go ahead and smooth that down. And of course, we'll come back and powder and do all of that stuff that you have to do when you've put a prosthetic on afterwards. And again, I'm just using baby powder because it's cheap and plentiful. And I'm just shaking some out onto my little old margarine lid. That's what I'm using here. Okay, back to the scales. So as I said, I really find that using like darker red tones really pushes things back in. So I'm going to focus on using this purple probably, maybe a little bit of red as well as the teal. I'll use those together to do this shading. I do want to make sure that I'm not missing the how do I find it? Oh, yeah, okay. So they're still doing sound, which, you know, really I should be watching, but I'm doing this because I actually do have a little promo thing to shoot after this. And so I thought, what a good way to dovetail the two things. Okay, so I've used some of that purple, and I have a very fine-tipped little paintbrush from the dollar store. And I'm going to go in between all of the scales. This is a time-consuming bit. I'm going to go in between all the scales and add this little bit of warm colored shadow. It's also going to help me differentiate the scales from one another, which is easier to do with the powder because I can get more precise. And now we can really see where like this brow bone protrudes, and then there's a recession underneath because we've had the mid-tone. We went and applied highlight on the scales, highlight on the brow, and now I'm going in between those two sort of imaginary protrusions with the shadow color. Really makes them both stand out, pop out. The best part of this is actually this part in between and underneath these two main scales, which I'm just going to do real quick with my finger because I love adding that shadow. Although y'all can't really see it all that well on this camera. And really should be done with the cream first, but I kind of failed at that, adding that step. But adding that shadow in between there really creates that depth, and I like that a lot. Okay, oh, we're pretty close. I'm really sad about that wrinkle. And I actually did make this prosthetic on a custom plaster cast of my own face. So it really does fit me. So that's not the fault of the size of the prosthetic. It is my own fault for not applying it carefully enough. At some point, I'm also going to need to take a break to eat because I'm starving. Okay, we did that side. Now we'll go ahead and do the next row up. I just saw Alien for the first time recently. I watched it with Ms. Irma Gerd, and it was fantastic. The robot guy was my favorite part by far. Loved him. Okay, now that I'm starting to lay these in, I don't know if it's coming across that well on the webcam, but like in real life, this is really starting to feel very three-dimensional. And that's very exciting to me. I saw a picture earlier today of somebody with actual prosthetic scales on their forehead, and I was like, ooh, that actually doesn't look all that different from the makeup version. If you do have real makeup brushes, I can't recommend enough that you use them. Oh, that's where I didn't really powder very well. It's still quite creamy, still very creamy. So I think I'm going to go ahead and use my little powder puffy guy, and I'm going to put some powder on there so I don't have to worry about that anymore in the future. Now I've lost my brush. Maybe it was this one. So this is also like deciding really how intense you want to get, because honestly, these little scales probably wouldn't have this much shadow. But in drag, we say paint for the back row. Under stage lights, things get really washed out. So it's definitely better to sort of over contour than under contour. And this is a very like fine and finicky process that takes a while. So I'm looking forward to now when we can continue with the prosthetic application work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and powder the edges of my prosthetic. I do know that I want like from the cheekbones down to be like like a person flesh, not monster flesh. Okay, so that's all powdered. So now we can start working on applying the foundation so that it matches the skin tone. I have to find the brush that I was using for foundation, although I think I've like used them all now for monster colors. So here's a key tip. Make sure that you keep color specific brushes. It's very useful. And maybe I used a sponge before. I don't really remember. I probably used a sponge. I can't see it here, but okay. So I'm going to take my foundation. When I made this, I did paint the object, the prosthetic, with foundation before I took it off of the the plaster cast of my face. So I've run out of foundation on my palette, so I'm going to just add some more. Hopefully it's enough. And I'm laying it on quite thick, even though in a dream world you would be able to, you know, have an alcohol-based palette that you would create thinner layers of fleshy toned color to really blend with your skin in a much more convincing way. This is much more important in film, of course, because it's way harder to do like textural corrections with film than it is with photos. Now, the video that I'm making after this is just a silly drag promo video, and people do not expect the kind of quality from, you know, silly drag videos that they expect from films. So as drag artists, we're really let off the hook in that respect. And also, most drag artists weren't really making like videos before this. Everyone was just performing live, but in the world of COVID, video is the way. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead with my foundation and start blending it up into the area that we had blended before. We'll blend some of that color down. Blend into, there we go. My eyes. My contacts are bugging me a little bit. One of the things that really brings a face to life once you've got foundation on it is blush. I'm not really sure that blush is going to be in the game plan for this whole look and experience. And I'm going to go ahead and just apply this. Now, see, I have this fake bruise here on my chin, which I don't really need or want. And I'll take a sponge for this part, because I definitely, when you use the sponge, you get kind of thinner coverage, which is what I want probably on the bottom of my face. It's not to look too cakey. I'll go over my upper lip. And then at some point we'll do a nose contour, but I haven't decided yet, again, what that's going to be. I think we'll just do like a natural nose contour, but I have to first make the decision about what this eye is going to be like. So torn gills, gills. Once I have that foundation on, I'm going to go ahead and re-powder, although I think some highlight on the top is not a bad idea. So I'm going to use some of the white color from that cream palette I have from Spirit of Halloween, and I'll mix it in with my foundation, and that's going to go up here. There was a little bit of blue on this brush. That's a fun discovery to be making. Okay, so that highlight will come up onto the cheekbone there and up around the eye cavity situation. This is not a super well applied prosthetic, by the way. Okay. The blue's kind of fine because this is definitely the monster side of the face, so we don't need to worry so much about how involved that blue color is. And I realize this is quite washed out on the webcam, so you can't really see how all that's going. Okay. We're making shapes, as my friend would say. So we have some gills, and really the rest of this is really deciding what that eye shape's going to be so that I can make the decision about the nose contour, and then we can start finishing up. But what I will do at this point is grab some powder contour color. This is again a cheap thing I got from Shoppers Drug Mart once upon a time, and an old brush. And I'm gonna stipple in some contour on this side. So this will be the highlight area, that's the cheekbone. And then usually you apply contour right around where I have all this gore, if you're doing drag, for example. So I will take some of this contour color, and it's probably too subtle really to see on the webcam, but I'm gonna try and create a little bit of that shape. May or may not work around the gore. I might get blood all over the place, which is really not the worst thing. Yeah, that's not really super working. That's fine. It's important to try things. I usually like to have a little highlight on my chin, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just with my finger. The bruise is still kind of visible, but whatever. Okay, so I think I really like the idea of having a normal eye on this side because that's the side where she's resisting the fishiness. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do like a normal drag eye, which we talked a little bit about on that side. Okay, and in 20 minutes, I'm going to go because I need to eat lunch and I want to watch the next Ghoul School session. Okay, so basically what we do here is we black out the eyelid again, and then we'll take it up into a little bit of a cat's eye. And we'll set it with a black powder. This is the logic we were using before of creating a new crease for the eye. And I'll show you how that happens in a second. Shouldn't have closed that. I'm going to need it again in like 2 seconds. But anyways, so I'm taking my black shadow again to set this. On the other side, we had a whole eye cavity, so we didn't have to be that careful. But on this side, we do want to be quite careful. And you'll see why in a second. Okay, so now I have that nice eye shape. But if you imagine an eye, you usually have your eyeliner right on the edge of the lid. Then the lid will have a highlight on it, and then you'll have a darker color in the crease. So in order, it goes dark line, light line, dark, blend it out. Dark line, when your eyes open, you'll have the light line, that's the light shadow on the lid, and then you have the dark back in the crease, and it gets blended up onto the brow bone. That's a really just like very simple, standard sort of eye makeup. So with a drag eye, we are emulating those three shapes, but the whole eyelid becomes the eyeliner line. This is also painting for viewers at a distance. So that becomes like the lash line, what we've just created there. And then we're going to create a new crease line. So I'm going to go ahead and make my crease about here. And I want it to follow the shape of my eye. And it's going to merge with my cat eye on this side. That's a little bit rough, but that's okay because we're going to fix it. So you kind of let that dry. And now we get to go in with shadows and a white highlight to kind of create the rest of the shape of the eye. At this point, I do like to rough in my eyebrow shape so that I know how much space I have to work with. And I have a little brush that I really like to use for that. Did I keep it out? Yes, I did. Okay. If you're going to go out and spend money on brushes, I highly recommend getting one that looks like this, that is a little angled, thin, angled little brush. I use those for everything. I have one for darker colors and one that I only use for white. I'm going to use, just because this is what I'm using today, I'm going to use this Revolution palette, and I'm going to use that purpley color. Really, like, people don't generally tend to have purple eyebrows, so we'll probably need to find a suitable brown. I do have one, actually. I know that I do. That is a really cheap palette that I got at Winners. So this is where my normal eyebrow is. I'm going to roughly emulate that shape. When you get to a powder shadow and you're doing something more like this rather than monster makeup, you load your brush with your color and then give it a couple, send all of the excess flying away. So I'm just going to rough in the shape of the brow, kind of how I want it. Because we're doing drag, you know, I could have left my natural brow here. If I was doing like a film, I probably would have done that. But the promo video I'm shooting is a drag video, so I want to feel and look like I'm in drag. There are many ways to do a brow, many shapes and sizes. This is a pretty standard brow for me, but also I really prefer a sort of gradient brow. So I stop my solid color about halfway across my eye, pretty much in line with my pupil if I'm looking straight forward. And then I'll go in with a much lighter color on the front edge to rough in the rest. It might not work for this look because I do have a monster coloration going on. So I may have to just go ahead and rough in like a much darker shape. But I do like to fade that front edge. This is cool. I'm happy with this decision. Great. So I'm going to go down into my little collection here and grab out this e.l.f. palette that has a whole range of like creamy brownie colors. And I'm going to use that to rough in the brow in a more kind of sensible palette. I could have used this right from the jump. Why didn't I? Who knows? Not me. I also then have a little eyebrow makeup dye. It's a liquid brow. It's CoverGirl. It's a liquid liner. It's dark brown. Maybe it's made for eyes. I don't know. I use it for my drag eyebrows sometimes. So I'll go in with this and do a few really thin lines. This requires quite a bit of control and practice. And I don't always do it all that well. I don't know how well you can see what's happening there. So I've done all these little wispy lines on the outer edge there. I could carry those in further if I wanted to, but I think I'm going to try and do it with this shadow and one of these dollar store brushes just to see. Well, I sort of flattened the tip of this with my fingers. It's not actually the worst. Okay, so we sort of have a brow there now. And then we'll come back to the overall shape. I don't know what kind of color this person would have been wearing, but so there's multiple considerations here. We could consider a color that will go nicely with the teal, that will complement it, that will work well with it, or we could consider a color that is in the same range as though, you know, she was wearing this makeup when she started to turn into a fish, and it speaks to her disposition towards fishy palettes and things. I don't know what makes the most sense in this nonsense narrative that doesn't actually exist, but keeping an eye on the time. 10 more minutes. I'm just sitting back and looking and thinking about what color might be nicest. But in any case, you definitely, if you're doing like a nice drag eye, you're going to want to, just seeing if anything's on this brush, take like a really nice bright color. I'm actually just going to use this straight up white, and you're going to highlight along the brow bone. This is something you ultimately will do after you've got all your color on for your shadow, but I'm just showing it because I don't know at what point I'm gonna decide on my shadow color, and that really makes that pop. And so because I still don't know my shadow color, we're gonna go ahead and do the other piece of the drag fake cut crease. So I'm taking my white angle brush, I'm going to stick with the cream makeup from Spirit, even though I have a much better one, just because I feel like I want to see what it's even capable of. I'm going to take this and it's like, okay. And this is my new fake. And by okay, I mean it's pretty bad. This is my new fake eyelid. We talked about a dark line and then the light line, that's your eyelid. And then you have the dark of the crease, which is that black line, and we'll blend the dark of the crease from whatever color I wind up choosing. But this is our new lid. Not a bad idea to wear jeans that you just don't care about. I wipe my brushes on my jeans constantly. So then I'm taking a white shadow and, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll use my little silvery shadow that I used for my scale highlights. And I'm using that to set this white. You will have to go back and touch up your black eyelid after this process is done because it will get light colored powders all over it. This is best done not with a hard brush that's going to move your cream makeup around, but with a fluffier brush that can just set the powder on top. There we go. So now I have a new fake eyelid. In order to prevent it from looking too illustrative, over here on this corner, this is like a super dead giveaway of your little fake eyelid moment. So I'm going to take a dark color. Truthfully, I still don't know what color this eye is going to be. So I'm going to take a bit of black and a bit of that purple, and I'm going to pack it into that corner. So firstly, it rounds it out, and then I'm going to sort of pat it out into the white color. So it creates kind of a fake shadow like exists at the edge of your eye. And we'll have more fun with this when I decide what this whole eye is going to look like. But in the meantime, let's go back to our, and if you have color ideas, please write them in the chat. I'm going to go back to my white color with my foundation and do a little highlight up here. Normally I use Nice Drag makeup by a company called Kryolan to do this, and it's great, but that's not what we're using today. So we're going to apply this light color up here and kind of buff it into the existing color. Typically I would apply my highlight first, but this whole process is different because we have a big bit of gore there. I'm going to bring it all the way up that way. Okay, grand. And this is just that, you know, kind of crummy cream white from Spirit of Halloween mixed with my normal foundation. I'm bringing it right up under my eyeball. And off over this cheekbone and up here towards my temple. I'm going to come in even just with a touch of the pure white. You can tell that it's not very good because the pure white barely exists. Okay, cool. Again, I'm just using a dollar store brush right now because we are trying to keep this as accessible as possible. And this brush happened to have had a little bit of blue on it. So make sure you have separate brushes for all your colors, children. Uncle Backslash has not done that, and I'm regretting it. But you know what? It's actually fine. It kind of melds the palette of the sea creature down onto my face in a way that is working. So it's totally fine. I also like to do a little bit of a highlight above my lip. Sure, why not? Oh, we'll need to decide. I want to do a lipstick color too, so we'll need to decide that as well. So again, your highlights and your lowlights are really highlights and lowlights. Highlights and shadows are really about creating the illusion of depth where it didn't exist before. Some things are sliding around over there, and I have no idea what they are or why they started moving. So that's a fun moment when we are have been doing horror workshops. And I've just flipped back over to Facebook real quick because I'm checking on I'm checking on what's happening with the nickel. Cool. I feel as though sometimes I just block parts of my face with my hand so I can see other parts, what feels like more clearly. I'm really keen to have some opinions on what color eyeshadow should be up here. If you are watching, please hop into the chat and tell me what you think. And what else? Sorry, I'm just looking real quickly at this. There we go. Okay, I'm going to go in with some black color. Again, I know I said no black, but we're mixing it with brown, and it mixes with the red onto that overhang. So I really want it to really feel like it's sinking. No flat black doesn't mean you can't use black at all. Just means don't only use black. Oh no, I got it into my highlight area. That's fine. We'll fix it. There we go. That's better. We certainly want that highlight to be a fair bit brighter, so I'm going to come in with a much lighter color and with some white because it's certainly fading down in there. Okay, that's more visible now. Great. Really, all the decisions now are going to be, oh, I have to contour my nose. And I haven't decided yet whether I should try and do that with a dollar store brush or not. But why not? Why not? Okay, it'll be hard, but not impossible. I'm going to use, normally I use obviously one of my like good drag makeup colors for contouring, and I'm going to try not to do that right now. So I think I'm going to try and take a little bit of my foundation. I'm going to mix it with some of the sort of brown color from the cream palette, and we'll see what we get. We'll see how we do. This is also a learning experience for me. So I've mixed it with some like brownie reddy purpley color that we were using earlier. And the process of a nose contour, the end of my nose is kind of round. I often like to bring it to a little bit more of a point, make it look just a little bit daintier. And then I'll add like a little boop at the end of the nose. So I'm just using this brush, and I'll pull that darker color down along the side of the nose. Certainly makes it more dramatic, a more dramatic nose. And I will put a little like dot at the end to give it some boop, make it real cute. Everybody has their like little thing that they do with nose contours in the drag world. So really it's anything goes. And I'm bringing some shadow underneath my nose as well. Trying to decide whether to stick with this for both sides or whether to do something a little bit more creaturey on the other side. Maybe we'll bring some of the blue color in. Who knows? This is where we get to be inventive. Okay, and bring it down over the side of the nose again on the other side. And then we'll come in after the fact with the highlight to really make the whole thing pop. In my drawing, I had it so that it had like kind of big flaring fish nostrils. That's still a possibility. That's still, you know, on the table, not out of the realm of possibility. I brought that dark color down over my nostrils. And now I'm bringing them back because I've decided maybe I want this person to have nostrils. And I'm just doing that with my contour color. Or my foundation, rather. Sorry. Okay, I think it's time for the next nickel film stuff that I want to check out. So I'm gonna take off. Thank you, those of you who tuned in. I really appreciate it. Check out my Gills. And I look forward to hopefully presenting you with a fun little promo video of the finished look later today. Well, actually not later today because I'm sending it to a show. So whenever they release it, it will be available. Okay, thank you so much. This is Backslash signing off.